Whew. Well, it's the time of the year again. The winter-long skiing and spring pollen are conspiring together to make me sick. And I've been struggling to stay upright for several weeks now. I still have a little bit of MCFS left, so I do this in the springtime just about every year. So it's time to hit the road to escape the sickness. I've been meaning to check out the desert in the springtime, so I plan this grand loop through Southern California to visit the Joshua Tree National Park and Mojave Desert that I've been to yet. I'm starting out from Sacramento, but you could just loop starting from San Francisco, San Jose, or LA. And you could loop back through Yosemite. But Tioga Road is usually closed till June because of the snow. So I'll loop through Lake Tahoe instead. I broke this loop into 3 legs. The first leg is from Sacramento to LA, and we'll make a stop at Pinnacles National Park and Carrizo Plains National Monument. The second leg is the same circle from LA to Death Valley, and this will be all about deserts, including Joshua Tree National Park, Lake Havasu, and Mojave National Preserve. Then the final leg will follow Highway 395 along the Eastern Sierra, and this one will be about snow and hot springs. It took me 10 days to do this loop, but it will take you at least 2 weeks if you make stops at Yosemite or Lake Tahoe. It's a long trip no matter what. So without further ado, let's jump in and begin the ride. I spent the first afternoon in the South Bay, where I lived over 20 years before moving to San Francisco. It was like a time travel. A lot has changed since I left. Not too many people knew what the internet was when I started my career building TCP/IP routers and applications back in the 80s. Now AI is all the rage. NVIDIA, which used to be a single building at the corner of Thomas Expressway and Wash Avenue, is now a $1 trillion company occupying all 4 corners of the intersection. But many places remain the same, and they made me feel as if I never left. I walked down the memory lane for a while, and then hopped back on US 101 to get to Gilroy, where I spent the night. Now, this is a great thing about using a Tesla as a camper. You can plug in overnight, club onto the back of your car, and sleep. No need to drive around looking for a Walmart parking lot or stealth camping somewhere. Nobody will give you a second look about a Tesla parked in a Tesla charging station. Stations are usually empty overnight, so you don't have to worry about idle fee. But I get out later and unplug just in case. I was out there before the sunrise. I grabbed the gas station coffee and drove down US 101 with the sun rising ahead of me. I decided to go to Western Entrance via Salinas Valley because that's where Tesla charging stations were. The road follows the Salinas River and the farms along the highway, and it was quite scenic. The Route 25 to the Eastern Entrance, on the other hand, goes through Hollister and the foothills, and it probably is not as interesting.
Without an ending, although my life with you had ups and downs, smiles and frowns, just pretending, and it's only my imagination.
It was still quite early when I got to the trailhead. I had enough time to fix the breakfast and dump the morning load. Then I was on the trail. The Pinnacles Creative Seats is a 12-mile loop trail spanning both east and west side of the park. I started from Chaparral parking lot in the west. If you're starting from the east side, you will start from Old Pinnacles Trailhead parking instead. The first part of the trail goes about 4 miles in clockwise direction along the creek. The trail is most flat and shaded till you cross the bridge and get to the Old Pinnacles parking area. Then the climb starts. You have to go over the ridge to get to the Bear Gulch area, the next waypoint. This section has nice views and interesting rock formations that Pinnacle is famous for. It is fairly strenuous climb though, and you will need some kind of sun protection since the trail is exposed most of the time. The Bear Gulch area was nicely shaded. This is a place where I will park my car and start hiking the next time. It was rather quiet though, probably because it was so nice. From there, you take Moses Springs Trail and climb up to Bear Gulch Lake. This trail will take you through one of the caves that the Pinnacles is famous for. I was going to have my lunch at the lake, but it wasn't much of a lake. It was a reservoir the size of a pond, and it smelled bad. So I pressed on. This was where the hardest climb of the loop started, but it sure was pretty with the wildflowers and rock formations. Then the final resting place, complete with the restroom high up on the mountain. This is not the peak though. To get to Hawkins Peak, you take High Peak Trail from here. I took Juniper Canyon Trail instead and made my way down back to the Chaparral parking lot. You can actually see the parking lot from here. It's always a great lift to make it back to the parking lot and see your car after a long hike. It's the best part of the hiking, especially if cold drink is waiting for you in the car. I drove to Senator's charging station and spent the night there. I didn't take any video of it. I was too tired, so I ate my dinner, washed up, and then went to sleep. It was a nice station though, on the parking lot of 43 Ranch on US 101. The store was closed, and I had the place all to myself all night long. The day 3 began at Motorway. I could have gone directly to Carrizo Plain as originally planned, but the ocean wasn't that far from the route. So I figured I would stop at Motorway, which I passed by many times on my way up and down Highway 1, but never stopped at. I left the Senado as soon as I woke up and had my usual breakfast of course cereal by the motor well. I was going to get to Korea's plane in the evening, so I had a plan of time. I strolled around Motorway, took the pictures of their residents, and soaked in this resort town by the sea. Then I took a nap at Morro Bay State Park. And I tell you, the nap under the eucalyptus tree by the sea was sweet. The fragrance carried on the cool ocean breeze felt unreal. Going to Santa Maria next turned out to be a fatal mistake. Well, okay, not exactly fatal, but it sure was a long detour. It would have taken only 100 miles if I went directly to Crystal Plain. But it appeared that I could enter the plain from the south, according to the Google Maps. So I decided to take a more scenic route over Los Padres Mountains to the south side. Turned out, you could enter the plains from the south. There was a dirt road, but it was impassable, with a regular passenger car or otherwise. So I had to make a circle around the plain back to the north side. By then, I ran out of fuel and I had to make a charging trip to Bakersfield. But hey, I get to see Pismo Beach and motion along the way. And now I get to say that I've been to Santa Maria too. The Cuyama Highway was rather scenic. It cuts through Los Padres National Forest following Cuyama River. Sort of like Highway 178 through the southern end of Sierra following Cotton River. It's not spectacular, but scenic enough to pull off once in a while to appreciate the view. Once you get out of the mountains though, the view turns into a desertscape, and that's where the Crystal Plain starts, abutting Los Padres Mountains. It's the valley between Los Padres and western foothills of Central Valley that you can see from State 5 on your way to and from LA. After the detour, I got to the plain as the sun was setting. Another 30 minutes through the plain, and it was dark by the time I got to Shelby Campground. The popular campground was pretty much full by the time I got there. I ate my dinner and then climbed onto the back of my car to sleep. This picture was taken the next morning. I was on the Shelby Loop Trail next morning. It starts from the campground and it's only about 4 miles long. But the hill behind the campground was quite steep, climbing 1,000 feet in less than 2 miles. It provided a beautiful and expansive view of the plain. I met this little guy on the way down. He was right in the middle of the trail, and I didn't see it till I got too close to it. But he kind of let me know that he was there by rattling. Then it was gone by the time I got my camera trained on it. There were some wildflowers on the plain, but I think it quite qualified as a super bloom. Turned out there isn't a super bloom in California this year, despite all the rain. Super bloom not only requires rain, but it also needs warm temperature, and the spring has been cool this year. Bakersfield may be at the bottom of everybody's joke, but it has plenty of cheap motels. It's a great place for a motel break if you're a car camper. I've been on the road for 4 days by now, and it was a good time for that break. So I checked into Motel 6 a few miles from Tesla charging station for a well-deserved break and real shower. I decided to go to LA the next morning. I originally planned to go to Antelope Valley for the Super Bloom, but the Super Bloom didn't look too promising from the look of Carrizo Plain. So I decided to skip it and go to Palm Springs directly. Since LA was sort of on the way, I figured I would stop in Koreatown and restock my fridge. And yeah, the phrase "since it's on the way" is now becoming my famous last word.
Will disappear, slip sliding away. slip sliding away. You know, the nearer your destination, the more you slip sliding away. And I know a woman became a wife. These are the very words she uses to describe her life. She said a good day ain't got no rain. She said our bad days when I lie in bed and think of things that might have been.
And I'll tell you, LA was pretty cheap. I went to Korean groceries, not to rent. It's about half the price of Sacramento. Maybe I should move here. With all the money I save on groceries, maybe I could afford the rent. But then I'll have to contend with the LA traffic. With the freeze we're stopped, I was on the Interstate 10 to Palm Springs. It wasn't bad at first, but it quickly slowed for the rest of the way. The view of the snow-capped mountains to the west kept me occupied though. They were San Bernardino and San Jacinto Mountains, I believe. It took a few hours, but I finally got to Cabazon near Palm Springs, where I was to bed down for the night. I didn't know it then, but this town was featured in Netflix documentary Octopus Murder. Some hanky-panky by Ronald Reagan ended up killing many people to cover up the deal, tied to the Iran hostage crisis, which resulted in election of Reagan, according to the documentary. And this town was one of the places where several murders took place.
Yeah, this is good.
And then, I was in Palm Springs next morning. I've seen YouTube clips of Indian Springs, and the oasis in the middle of the desert was nothing like I've seen before. And I understood then why they call it Palm Springs. I made a mental note then to visit Indian Springs if I had come to Southern California. That's what brought me to Palm Springs. So, was it worth the price of admission? Well, I think so. It was a novelty, sort of like a Disneyland for the outdoor types. At $12, it was a heck of a lot cheaper too. Or $7 if you're over 60 or something. The snow-capped mountains were still visible from Palm Springs to the east this time instead of the west, which made Palm Springs prettier than it would have been without them. I mean, the desert and snowy mountains, what's not to like? It's like having an ice cream on a hot day. The Joshua Tree National Park is right next to Palm Springs, and I was in Yucca Valley around noon. I recharged my car there and then went straight to Black Rock Campground, where the Panorama Loop Trail starts. Panorama Loop Trail goes about 6 miles with an elevation gain of about 1,000 feet. It's technically inside the park, but you don't have to go through any of the entrance stations to get to it. Which means I didn't have to pay the entrance fee. Not today anyway. Who knew there were mountains in Joshua Tree National Park? I thought it was all desert, but you climb up to one of its peaks and you get this kick-ass view of the snow-capped mountains. You look at the pictures on the net, and all you see is Joshua trees and rocks, and people camping in between them. You don't see the mountains, so it was a surprise to me to climb a peak and see the snow-capped mountains. And yeah, they were the same San Bernardino and San Jacinto mountains that's been following me since LA. I went to Toro Silva Casino in the town of Tuena Palms after the hike. Not to gamble, but to bet on for the night in the charging store. I bisected the park from north to south the next day. I was going to see the Arch Rock in the morning and then continue on to Lake Havasu. But then the sign on the way pointed to Split Rock, so I took a side trip to see it first. Arch Rock was supposed to be a short trail of less than a mile, but I couldn't find the arch, so I decided to get off the trail and explore, thinking that I could loop around the boulder field back to the trail. Well, there was no path. I beat around the bush for an hour, so to speak, and then returned back the same way. The actual arch is at the beginning of the trail, so you don't need to go deep into the trail like I did if you just want to see the arch. You may get disappointed though, especially if you went to Arches National Park. Oh, and Chola Garden was right on the Pinto Basin Road on the way out. Maybe it's the memory from the childhood. There's something about dry riverbed that draws me in. I relish them in Utah. Hurricane Wash, Grand Wash, No Name Wash, you name it. I can just drive by when I came across Porcupine Wash on the way out of the park. It is a 9 mile trail that follows the wash and then loops back out. I would have had it on my list if I knew about it, but it was already past noon and I didn't have much time. So I followed the wash in for about an hour, then came back out. I'll have to return and finish it the next time I'm in the Joshua Tree. Blythe, California was another great place for a motel break. When I found a room for $45 on Priceline, I had to take the advantage. It's been 3 days since I left Bakersfield, and it was time for another real shower. I take a bath every day in the wild if I get enough privacy, or sponge bath if I don't. But you do need a real shower once in a while to get yourself really cleaned. From here, my plan was to follow the Colorado River to Lake Havasu. I figured the river would be pretty much dry by the time I got here. The boys siphoned for Las Vegas, and then for irrigation along the way. To my surprise though, there was quite a bit of water in the river. I guess LA and Imperial Valley are the real culprits that sucks all the water out of the Colorado River. And this is where the microphone of my main camera stopped working. You're not gonna hear any sound from it from now on. Buckskin State Park was a surprise find of the trip. It's located a few miles before Packardam, unlike Abasu. It has a beautiful beaches surrounded by red rocks on the one side and lined with palm trees. It's a beach in the desert.
500 feet.
I've never seen anything like it.
To stay on Buckskin
You have to pay $10 to get in though. I just took a look and then came back out. I still had a long day ahead, so I didn't have enough time. But if you're a tourist type looking for a place to lounge around for a while, this place would be well worth $10 for the admission. Then I came to Lake Abachi proper. No co-eds on spring break, but the lake was beautiful the same. I didn't plan any hikes here, but it occurred to me that there should be some great hiking opportunities around the lake. So I did a quick search and found Cattail Loop Trail. And this turned out to be one of the highlights of the trip. The combination of turquoise blue water and the brown earth of the desert was absolutely out of this world. You can also go down to the lake for a dip. There were a few pockets of beaches that were accessible. I highly recommend this trail if you ever visit Lake Havasu. You get spectacular views of the black and red rocks across the lake on your way to Lake Havasu City. Albacete Park provides full money views of the lake and those rocks. It's about 10 miles from Cattail State Park. There are several trails leading to the lake from there, but the sun was setting and I didn't have time, so I drove on. I'll just have to come back for it some other time. And another day, another test hotel. This time it was in Needles, California. I usually cut across Mojave through Interstate 15 when I come back from Arizona. This time, however, I was on Interstate 40 and I was seeing tall peaks shrouded in cloud on a cold morning. The temperature swung about 40 degrees Fahrenheit from the day before in Lake Havasu. It's day 9, and I circled back east to Mojave from Lake Havasu. I plan to go to Bullhead City and Lake Mojave, but I've seen Lake Havasu, and I figured Lake Mojave would be more of the same. I should leave something to return for in the future anyway. Castle Sand Dunes was my first and only stop in Mojave. My plan to go to Lava Tube and Teutonic Peak got thwarted by the road closure, so I went straight to Baker afterwards. Castle Dunes is a convenient first stop if you're entering Mojave from Interstate 40. Climbing sand dunes is always a hard work. The pair of sandals I was wearing didn't make it any easier. But then I'm not sure if hiking boots would have made a difference. I attempted to climb the peak and then gave up halfway up. But it still provided spectacular views of the desert plain and the peaks. The train tracks went through Mojave Desert. I thought it was just relics of mining days. But then I saw the train coming down the track from Castle. So apparently the train tracks in Mojave are operational. It was a Union Pacific train coming towards me while I was rambling on the desert plains.
In 500 feet, your destination will be on the right.
Who knew there was such a huge charging station in the middle of the desert? Baker is one of the largest Tesla charging stations with over 40 stalls. They are building another 120 stall charging station here. It turned out Baker is halfway in between LA and Las Vegas, so the gamblers have to stop and refuel here, unless they want to gamble on their range and risk getting stranded in the desert. It was only noon when I was done with the Mojave. Then I was well on my way to Tecopa. We stayed in Tecopa Hot Springs for a night back in 2017 when we were on the cross-country trip. That was my first war therapy. I was still sick with MCFS back then, and camping in a car was quite a struggle. Then we dipped into Hot Spring, and everything was alright again. This time I'm boondocking by a free hot spring known as the Tub. It was murky with the sediment, and a naked guy was in there. But hey, what do you expect for free, right? The sediment cleared overnight, and Mark left for Utah. So I had the clear tub all by myself in the morning. You need to take Furnace Creek Road from Tecopa Hot Springs to get to the tub. It's a dirt road, but you can make it in a regular passenger car. You don't want to exit by continuing on it though. The road becomes impassable unless you're in a high clearance vehicle. So you'll want to turn around and go back the way you came in. China Ranch State Farm was another oasis in the desert with a creek running through it. But first, you have to get down to the bottom of the canyon to get there. Unlike Indian Canyon, it's free. You don't have to pay to hike through it. But you can stop at the store and buy yourself a date product from the date farm. You can do this trail from the top if you want. All you have to do is walk south and then follow Amargosa River. It's a long walk though, and it'll take all day. I hiked from China Range to Slack Canyon for a few miles only. That's the most scenic portion anyway. We go through the oasis following the Willow Creek and then out to the desert before crossing the river to the Slack Canyon. It's as good a hike as any in Death Valley area, and probably only trail with the flowing water. There was supposed to be a waterfall here according to Google Maps. I was incredulous, but I went anyway. And I was right, there was no such a thing. It wasn't as scenic after this point either, so I turned around and came back. Milkshake and french fries are my favorite post-hiking meal. The store didn't have french fries, but they did have a shake with a bit of dates in it. It was a bit expensive at $7, but they were kind enough to refill 2 gallons of water for me, so it was a fair deal. Now I was off to Death Valley proper, but first I had to fill up my car in Pahrump. Pahrump was a surprisingly beautiful town. My image of it was that of a desert town in the middle of nowhere. In reality, however, it's set under the snow-capped Mount Charleston. It's only 20 miles from Las Vegas on the other side of the mountain. I lost all my videos of it somehow, so here's the picture from the internet instead.
I don't know what I like about you, baby. But I'm waking up in firelight, spinning like a crazy wheel. Feel so good.
I was yet to see any super bloom at this point. Then I finally saw one near the Death Valley Junction. It was a field of marigolds as far as the eye can see. I'll tell you, it was quite a sight. And it sure made the trip to Pahrump worthwhile.
Baby stars on don't give up on us, I know.
Now turn right onto California 127.
I really lost my head last night. You've got a right to stop believing. There's still
In 500 feet, turn left onto California 190. Now turn left onto California 190.
don't give up on us, babe. Lord knows we've come this far.
The first stop in Death Valley took my breath away. I've been to Death Valley several times, but I've never stopped at Dante's View. That's probably because I'm always coming from BD or Ridgecrest, and taking the side trip Dante's View costs extra 50 miles. And I usually have barely enough to make it to the next charging station through Death Valley. This time though, I was traveling from Pahrump, and I had enough range for the trip. The Badwater Basin is usually west or flat, but there hasn't been so much spring rain this year. There was an actual lake in the basin. The Jade Basin under the snow-capped mountains was unreal. If you have to come here only once in your life, this year should be it. On the way out, I saw a couple of bipeds in the Zabriskie Point Canyon. Apparently there's a trail that I didn't know about. So I looked it up, and it appears that you can get to Badwater Basin from here. It's a long distance though, so you may need to backpack for 2 days. I'm pretty sure there's no water source, so you'll have to carry all the water that you need. Oh, and you'll have to do it in the early spring if you want to avoid the heat that Death Valley is famous for. Then I was at Mosaic Canyon, my final stop in Death Valley. It was past 5 p.m. I didn't have much time, so I just walked in for about a mile and came back out. It wasn't much different from other slot canyons anyway, except for the different types of rocks. This canyon, like the rest of Death Valley, was once the ocean floor, and the sediment eventually turned into rocks in between limestones underneath. Some of the limestones then turned into marble, and the canyon ended up with a mosaic of 3 different rocks intermingled together. The trailhead was at almost 1,000 feet above the sea level. That was high enough to provide a nice view of the valley, since the valley is at below the sea level. The final leg of my trip took me north on Highway 395 along the Sierra Mountains. The first stop of this final leg was Alabama Hills. After stopping at Lone Pine to charge the car, I was on Whitney Portal Road to Alabama Hills. A few minutes in, the road was closed for some reason, and I had to veer towards Turtle Creek Campground. I figured there would be a place to boondock along the way. You don't get the full frontal view of the Sierra Mountains like you would of Whitney Portal Road, but there are plenty of Sierra Mountains to the south. It was pretty crowded. I guess everybody had to move south because Whitney Portal was closed. I managed to find a small niche between two campers, enough for my small car, relatively speaking. I was pretty sticky after hiking Tacopa and Death Valley, so taking bath was the first order of business before going to bed. And this is why I come to Alabama Hills. Where else would you wake up to soaring mountains like this in a desert? Snow-capped mountains and the desert has become the theme of this trip by now. This is what my car looks like when it's not on the road. I do the laundry whenever I bathe. It doesn't really take too much water. I only need a gallon to bathe and then wash my shorts and shirts at the same time. The Instant Pot Defunct has worked out well. I also have a hot plate, but I rarely use it these days. It's so much easier just to pour something into the pot and press the button than fiddle with the hot plate and pots or pan. And here's the final look at my home du jour before departing and hopping back on Highway 395 to continue north. Lone Pine, Bishop, Big Pine, Bridgeport. There are many picturesque towns along Highway 395. Some people like Bridgeport, but I prefer Bishop.
Now
It's a little
turn
bigger
right onto North
and has a better views of the mountains, both the Sierra and the White Mountains to the west. You can see snow-capped mountains on the both sides of the town. And I bet Tesla charging station in Bishop has one of the best views. I did Big Pine Lakes, all 7 of them, back in 2022, and I wasn't going to do it again. They are probably buried deep in the snow and not reachable anyway. But I decided to do a short hike in Little Lakes Valley, just north of Bishop. So I turned onto Rock Creek Road off 395, and it was just covered with snow. I kinda knew, but I didn't expect so much of it from the beginning. The road was closed halfway up before getting to the trailhead. I parked my car there, fixed an early lunch, and started trekking about a mile before the trailhead. The snow was soft, and I probably didn't need the spikes. But since I had it, I might as well make use of it. A pair of skis or snowshoes would have been better though. I could have gone all the way in even if I wanted. The snow got too soft in the afternoon, and I was puzzling all over. I got to the first lake, Meg Lake I believe, and then turned around. There was still plenty of exercise. I could have been stuck if I went all the way in to Jam Lake.
Now turn left onto US 395 North. Drive west on US 395 North for 37.8 miles.
The next stop, Hot Creek. This is another place I've never been to, despite being on Highway 395 so many times. This time I made a plan to make a stop, and I was going to, rain or shine. From the look of it on the internet, it seemed like a remarkable place, with the steam rising from the flowing creek. Maybe there's a place I could take a dip to. The snow-capped mountains and the creek. This was the place alright. But there was no steam rising from the water. What's going on? The water was cold, that's why. Maybe the geothermal spring was further down. So I drove further down the road to the geological side. And then I found this sign warning scalding water. The steam will surely rise now. Well, no such luck. The water was still cold. I guess there was so much cold water pouring into the creek that the creek was no longer hot. Maybe it'll get hot again in the fall when the snow melt stops flowing into the creek. Well, so much for the hot creek, I guess. I could have stopped at Buckeye Hot Springs near Sonora Junction to take a dip instead. But I was at the end of the trip and I was pretty tired by now. So I decided to head home. And my GoPro decided to die on me just in time. So this picture of Sonora Junction was the last of my video.
Too long in the wind, too long in the rain, taking every comfort that I can. Looking back and longing for the freedom of my chains. I'm in your loving arms again. If you could hear me now, singing somewhere through a lonely night, dreaming